Hi, everyone. Welcome. Let me fix my ring light for you. Oscar, Evelyn, and Daniela will be joining us shortly. Thank you for joining us via Facebook Live. This is our second conversation or artisan conversation for the home exhibition at Acogedor. Last week, we talked with Teresa and Renee and Dina and Georgina, and their work was situated in the Little Gestures theme. Today's our second, as I mentioned, and we're talking with Oscar, Evelyn, and Daniela, and their work is situated in the time theme. Before we get started, I also want to let you know that we're doing some ancillary events as well as Instagram takeovers. Right now, Ace Alamillo, who is from the Philippines, he is currently taking over the Cogedor.space Instagram until Saturday. And then on Sunday, Kayla Tang will be taking it over for another 4 days. And I do want to let you know, if you weren't following them, Tobin Nichols just finished yesterday, and on his third day, I believe, he did a really intimate IGTV, and it's still on the page, so you should check that out. It's really beautiful and touching. He talks about his experience actually having COVID at the very beginning of lockdown with him and his roommates. So today we've got Evelyn. Can you say hi? And Oscar and Daniela. And so Evelyn and Daniela have black and white digital photography that they're showing, and Oscar has a soft sculpture. So I'm gonna give them each a little bit of time to introduce themselves and their work. And yeah, so I'm gonna start with Evelyn. And I'm gonna share my screen so you can see her work. So you just wanna let them know a little bit about who you are and your work.
Hi everyone, good night. I'm Evelyn Chávez, or Evelyn. I was inspired kind of like by my workspace and also my background. I graduated with a master's in developmental psychology, and that has been my inspiration for my work. I'm really I really want to take the role of the observer and portray that through my viewers. And I am Los Angeles based. I am first generation Mexican American, and I'm currently 26 years and I'm just going along with photography and see where it takes us.
Great, thank you, Evelyn. Next, Oscar, if you could, I'm going to share your piece, and if you could tell us a little bit about yourself and the work in the show too.
Hello, my name is Oscar. I'm 26 years old as well. I'm first generation queer Latinx born and raised in California. I received my bachelor's degree from Cal Arts, grade school. And I'm just residing now in like Silmar, just trying to get myself situated and just staying low key for a little bit. The work I made is called Strawberry Flavored Licorice, and it's a soft sculpture inspired by a visit to the Made in LA 2018 show that was at the Hammer by these two artists. I think their name were Jade Gordon and Megan Whitmash. I hope I said it right. The whole thing was just like soft sculpture, and it had this like really 1970s like mysticism to it. And I think it spoke to me with my work. 'Cause I think I'm really interested with like healing and the power of like psychomagic and intuition and just transcending trauma in general. The work is a soft sculpture. Like I said, it's made out of cotton, denim, honestly like repurposed material. Like I'm a big stickler on like being utilitarian and being resourceful. I used like a old laundry hamper to make the metal lining for like the petals of the piece. and then I covered it with like a hot pink polo shirt that I had, and then I used like a really old like denim shirt to make the chain link, and then not pictured, but I stuffed them with like really old pieces of like socks and underwear, just like cut up to kind of make like the encasing of it. Um, the piece is actually shot on my bed with like some curtains as like the dressing, I guess you could say. And yeah, I think with the piece, I was really interested with like the idea of like portals and just making some sort of like item, some like object to kind of like sit with and just think about like looming fear and looming uncertainty and how to like assess or like how to like recognize that power within yourself to just like kind of take a deep breath and just move forward, and you know how to just transcend like whatever thing you might be going through, especially now with like COVID. It's like very uncertain and chaotic. So and so yeah, that's strawberry flavored licorice for you. So
Thanks, Oscar. I did not know about the socks and underwear stuffing.
forgot to mention.
Yeah, that's a great tidbit. And before we get started with the conversation, I also want to introduce Daniela Navarro. If I'm going to share my screen again with your piece, if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself and the work.
Hello, buenas noches. My name is Daniela Navarro, and I would like to thank Acogedor for this opportunity. I feel very grateful. It's very nice to know all of this artists' work and be able to be part of it. So thank you. And I guess when COVID hit home, I have it hit a little bit different, I think, in my household because I have my son that requires medical. He's a little bit medical fragile, you could say. So for us, we had to really almost be secluded at home. So it was a little bit difficult to adjust. Like we were really cautious going out, and if we had to go to the store, it was only a member of our household. So during the month of May, we celebrate a lot of like my son's birthday. He graduated junior high. It's my birthday. We celebrate Dia de las Madres, you know, and I'm like, I get to celebrate it twice a month. But you know, so the celebrations during the month of May came a little bit different this year. So it was a really time to kind of home where we're supposed to feel a little bit more at peace. It started becoming a little bit like, oh, like, is this, when is this going to be over, you know? So it was a little bit I guess stressful and nerve-wracking. So but you know, I took pictures, and then during my editing process, memory, a flashback, you could say, of my childhood came to me. And it's when I was at home, and then I was like very curious, you know. I was looking through, I would grab a mirror and look through it, like squint my eye, you know, and walk around the house, you know, just like pretending that it was upside down. So it was a way of me to kind of escape into that world. So in my editing process, I just kind of, you know, I was working through this, and it kind of, it helped me like to kind of like, oh, this is a nice memory, so nice, something to cope with. And so that's why I did it this way. And it's kind of more or less how it's helped me deal with the situation. And that's for now what I have to say.
Hey, Daniela. Let's stop the share. So I want to thank all three of you for being here today. Especially, I'll try to get closer to my ring light. Especially this time of night. I know it can be a little difficult. I'll let everybody know, we did a planning meeting before this, and so we're very prepared. But I was really struck by how many kind of different things that each one of the artists has in common, and also like how they kind of go about their work and how they were thinking about time during COVID. And one thing that came up in a lot of different ways was this time as a construct, and given to us by our society, by our oppressive, patriarchal, colonialist society. And they will talk more about that. But then also, we talked about time through nostalgia and melancholy, and Oscar kind of when they talked about the time as a portal, that was also when that came up, and then also thinking about time as escape. So I am going to hand the mic over to the artists to discuss their work and COVID and quarantine.
Well, I guess I'll go first. One thing that really struck me with like in Evelyn's work, just like I feel like growing up in a Latinx household, like you kind of already grow up in like a crammed space with like different levels, or like a multi-generational family. It's like you kind of have like 7 people living in a house or something. And I feel like when I saw like your piece, it kind of reminded me of like having your one little like cozy like space to just like kind of release, or like you mentioned like watch, that's like where you like do your art or like watch movies or something. And I feel like it kind of brought me back to that place of like having your space, having your me time. And I feel like in a way quarantine has kind of caused lots of people to confront that, like um usually like folks who like maybe aren't used to being at home or like having like that cozy space, they kind of see like going out as like an escapist thing, or like going out all the time, just like kind of like finding themselves or something. And I feel like people like are kind of like in a weird like full stop moment of like with quarantine, with like suddenly now they're like confronted with like themselves even, or like confronted with like actual issues that maybe they were trying to avoid or something. And so I think about like partners, or like people who are married, maybe even families, like maybe families who have like issues or something, like now they're kind of just like in a weird like big brother type of feel, like everyone in the house like trying to figure it out or something. But it really just made me think about just in general, like what it means to have like your own time and your own space to just like be yourself or just release or something. I don't know. um,
Yeah, so definitely when I thought about this and I thought about Acogedor, the name itself kind of drove me to the space. And for the people that know me, the garbage is legendary for me, at least. And yeah, that's where I get my work done, where I keep my stuff handy, where I relax, where I do everything. And yeah, it's just literally my go-to space. And like you said, I also see how going out was an escape for many of us, and even for me at times. Even being in this space for too long was a little too much sometimes, but there's always projects to work on. And yeah, especially with the TV nowadays, it kind of takes me back to um, like kind of looking at it through a social sense. Since COVID, we're all going through this. There's no way around it, and it takes me back to World War II and how TV became embedded into our society. This was like the first time where people were sharing moving images, and TV was a huge influencer, still is, right, as far as imagery goes. And this became the reality for people in the 50s, and also not only just as an influence, but it was also like a family pastime where people connected through their images and shared and related with each other and their communities. Fast forward 21st century, COVID, it's still very powerful, and it's also it's seen as a source of leisure more or so now, and a distraction more than anything, which also reminds me of a professor that I had during a photography course, and she mentioned how in order to be a photographer, you can't sit around watching TV. And it just kind of stuck with me, just like her saying that, just her view of TV and photography all in one. And then, yeah, now just the transition, it was kind of interesting to see how TV play a big role in society. I still feel that people that weren't even watching or didn't really care to watch so much TV were or are now, especially with our streaming services, is so accessible. And yeah, during this transition, like I said, it's been welcome, but it's also a double-edged sword, where like people used to go out, right, as you were speaking, and they would escape, and this can also be an escape, a mental escape of sorts. And it was kind of nice, because I noticed how a lot of people that were on the go finally slowed down. And I think that we have these colonialized ideals that we just have to keep going and going and going, especially in America. Like in Mexico and in many European countries, people still take siestas. They still take that time for themselves and make time to stay healthy and go home, rest, come back to work, right? And that's something that I felt a lot of us didn't have before. And yeah, and I saw a lot of connections again, people sharing what they were watching, people sharing what movies and TV shows they enjoyed, or they just kind of kept up with, these conversations, just because it was a source for people to connect again. And yeah, I also think that imagery has become a lot, or it's very increasingly sophisticated, and it's not always not always a positive thing, right? We definitely through time have reinforced this image-driven society, and although it's increasingly sophisticated, it oftentimes also desensitizes us. And it just depends. For example, that's why I leave the empty chair in front of the TV, because it's only a matter of time of how, and it depends of how and when you wish to participate. And there's this great advocate whose name is Jean Kilbourne. I don't know if I butcher that, but yeah, her big work is called Killing Us Softly. If you guys want to look her up, she talks more about the messages behind visual imagery and societal expectations starting at a very young age. And yeah, I mean, this is a conversation that can stretch beyond the scope of my photo, but they all have been relevant conversations of TV. And it's just always served as a primer for our later attitudes. And yeah, so so when I think of Acogedor, I go back into that room, and then I see that TV, and yeah, like I said, through a social lens, it hit something deep.
I really like what you said about these, like, I think like during our meeting we called it like the timeline or something, and I feel like on American time it's so like, working 40 hours a week and then working another job for 40 hours a week and like never having that balance or something. And I don't know, I just feel like American culture, like as Latinx bodies, I feel like we kind of feel it like in our bodies in a different way. And we need to have our siesta, we need to have like our days off, we need to have like our basic needs met. And I feel like as someone who's 26, I feel like I'm still like fighting to have my basic needs met, even if it's like having insurance or like health insurance or something really like normal. And I feel like other people who have like generations and generations of like wealth or even just like property, etc., in this country, I feel like don't have to think about like, like having a car or something really, that wouldn't cross your mind. Where I feel like for us, we kind of have to like work like twice as harder or like even like triple or whatever. Um, but another thing that we're talking about is like the difference between queer time and like straight time. And I feel like, some folks have like um, different things they place more value on. So like maybe for some folks it's like having a family and that's like their like pinnacle, like their dream come true. For others it could be like having a career or like the education. Maybe for others it could just be like having a home, having their own space. So I think that's like a really interesting thing that I feel like maybe I think a lot of folks right now are like maybe confronting again with like being home so often. It's like they're kind of like in this weird like space of like just evaluating their life like all over again. Even folks who like are maybe older or like folks who are younger, it's like, well damn, like if we make it out alive, like what's next? And then you mentioned the whole like um kind of like TV taught me how to feel, now real life has no appeal kind of feeling, where I feel like maybe folks like, I think it's like a really Western thing to think that like nothing bad can happen in this country, or like, that wouldn't happen here because, XYZ. But I think folks for the first time are having those like those ideas, thoughts in their heads. And I think that is why maybe some folks are kind of like not even taking it seriously in the beginning, like COVID in general, or the whole like debate about like wearing masks. Some folks are like, oh, I have a pre-existing health condition, like it's gonna mess me up even more. Or I don't know, like just it's interesting how an epidemic is even then having all these like interesting like split decisions or split like conversations with folks who like are just, I don't know, they're so out of the loop or something. Like I don't know what's wrong with them. But it made me think about that, like people who are just so like, how do I say it? Like they're so in this like existential fatigue that like they just can't they can't wake up, and they think it's like a really weird, like, how do I say, I don't know, like they just really trivialize again like their life and their lifestyle. Again, they don't think that like nothing bad can happen to them because they're in USA and like my president can help me and fix everything, poof, like everything's fine. But clearly we haven't been seeing that. And it's interesting even just like seeing people like who are very conservative, like even have second thoughts about like whoever they voted for in this past election. So it's like very interesting how like this shift that we're all in. Like one thing I wrote about is how like being someone who already is an existentialist, I feel like it's interesting now seeing everyone on the same page, which has kind of been a really strange form of like relief, where I feel like, for once now everyone's like kind of thinking the same thing. And like, I don't know, it's I feel like it's also creating an interesting time with like wearing masks in public. I feel like is making people be more mindful of others in a strange way. Like, because usually I feel like living in LA, people are really not friendly. And I feel like for once now people are like catching on to these like social cues and just, for once it's like seeing the humanity in others. Like I work at a cafe and I feel like one thing we're always confronting is like telling people to put a mask on. And it's like, it's interesting, just like something so simple, like something, I don't know, I just feel like people are not being mature, and I feel like you kind of have to remind them and be like a mom and be like, hey, listen, like it's not over because you say it's over, so do better. um
I also think that it's part of the American dream that we're sold on as being in America. And it definitely touches upon that, like everything that you discussed. One thing that really stands out to me is the whole like queer and straight timeline. Like I had never heard that. Excuse my ignorance, but I had never heard that. Definitely though, when you said that, it struck a chord. I felt it before. And it was, I had this experience. I must have been maybe 10 years old. And I think I was like, I was being rude or something. And my mom looked at me and she told me that when I had my own kids, my kids were going to be twice as bad. And then I remember looking at her and feeling confused and telling her, well, I don't want to have kids. And then she looked back at me and she said, well, normal people want to have kids. And then I was like, whoa, like ever since I didn't realize like how much that persuaded me. And it wasn't until like very recently where I kind of started just pursuing what I want to do that I was like, hey, why did I want kids? Like I never wanted them. When, like, how did that change? And yeah, and it was just sort of a relief. Like I feel like for the biggest part of my career, I was so focused and just my goal was to just finish up as fast as I can because there's some sort of imaginary ticking time bomb that had been created for me. And as soon as I took the whole, and as soon as I remember that and took that into perspective, it just kind of, it was like a huge weight was lifted off me. This timeline kind of ceased to exist for me.
It really like screws you up because like even for me, like in my family, I'm the firstborn, and I feel like I kind of feel this like how do you say, there's a preconceived notion that because I'm firstborn and like I'm, you know, male presenting to my family, I feel like I have to be like the next in line kind of thing. Like I feel like even pursuing art as a career or like an education, I feel like it's like kind of like it always goes down to like, okay, so like how are you going to make money or how are you going to provide for us or like XYZ. And I feel like that has been such like a difficult thing for me to like have to think about or like toil with or confront with, like being young and like in line to pursue like MFA. So I feel like now I have to like think about everything, and it's like, well, damn, like why can't I just pursue what I want to do? Like, why does it have to be like a money thing at the end? Is what I'm always thinking about. But again, it's like that like American timeline of like, well, you're in this country, you have to provide, you have to have XYZ, and I feel like you feel it even more with like being Latinx because I feel like there's this like strange feeling of like conservatorship that comes with assimilating that I feel like is really hard to like crack. And then even being like queer, it's like another layer that I have to deal with um, in terms of queer time. But I feel like, you know, as long as we're pursuing like whatever we want to do, I think that's like a really radical thing for us as artists and as like Latinx people to just, you know, some folks don't have the privilege to just like study art just because they want to. Like some people want to, but I feel like they have to find like the job at the end or something. I don't know if that makes sense, but just timelines in general.
Totally makes sense. And it's kind of like the whole American dream. You know, it goes back to the patriarchy and how you're expected to work and how time is money. And people literally, instead of seeing it like a tool, it becomes a standard for success. And it can be really upsetting. And it's like you said, as a Latinx, like you definitely feel that pressure, especially first generation. I have never met anyone that is first generation that hasn't felt that pressure. But I could be wrong. And yeah, it's just crazy. I know Daniela, I know you mentioned something related to that with the straight timeline. I know you had an experience. I don't know if you feel comfortable sharing. I know it influenced a lot of your work too.
Yeah, I guess we were talking about time and time for, yeah, I guess at my household, you could say it stopped completely. But it was, for us, our son was priority, you know? So it wasn't like, oh, my husband stopped working, he took some time off. We didn't really know what was happening, you know? We really kind of like, oh, we have to stay in quarantine. So it was kind of at home a little bit like, I don't want to say depressing, but we're like, well, what's going to happen? You know, it's this pandemic, this virus, you know, is killing people, and you know, us like we don't really know, you know. So after I guess some time, we learned, I guess we learned at home to enjoy the time, you know. It's very comforting to know that, you know, we're safe, we're okay. Um, some of the things that that happened before all of this, like you were saying, is that I guess time for me already was a little bit different. When I was younger, I went to Yucatan and I studied there in Mexico for a couple of years, which that time was like awesome. You know, it's like I got to learn practicar mi español mejor, you know. So it was really padre. I those like good times, you know. So from there, you know, I came back to the States, and like you were saying, like sometimes you get pressure, like, am I going to have a baby or not, you know? But I was really trying to enjoy life, you know, try to be independent and just, you know, but then I got married, we have our son. And then with the birth of my son, that's when time kind of changed us again, because we kind of had to slow down. My son has a, I guess, muscular dystrophy. So our whole life kind of changed. So time has always been kind of, we kind of have to go as it comes, you know. Um, it's taking it day by day. And it's like I can't complain, you know. It's like due to my son's birth, it's like I met people that I don't think that I've ever would have met. You know, I met angels in disguise. I met you know, wonderful professors, friends, art. I've been surrounded by artists, you know, because my son is not able to communicate verbally. So I again had to go to college and study American Sign Language to help him. So that's kind of like where another time changed for me, and here I am at Acogedor. It's so wonderful, you know. It's so time. I know that it's really sad, you know. It's like it's not always like, oh, muy bonito, you know. Pero it's, I know family members that have been hit by COVID. It's you know, it's a sad situation for a lot of people, and then it kind of, in some way, everybody gets hit by it. But you know, there's always, like they say, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Hay que tener esperanza, y mucho amor, you know, mucho amor, yeah.
I want to just jump in here to let you guys know, I'm just monitoring the Facebook, that there's lots of validation and people really excited that they are with you, and it sounds like they're really hearing you and they have similar experiences. I just wanted to let you guys know. I haven't seen any questions yet, so please post questions if you have them. I also want to say that I really, I think it's some, thank you, Evelyn, for making sure that Daniela talked about her experience in time, because it's different than both of yours, and part of it, where, you know, where she is in her life right now, and then also, you know, being a parent. And I think that shifts. I mean, as a parent myself, that shifts a lot, especially in the quarantine.
I was really inspired by Daniela's just the way, like, her circumstance is so like poignant and so real, and I feel like it's like a strange like twist of fate or like destiny that I feel like kind of like brings you to a new point in your life that I know it's like very hard and like bittersweet, but I feel like you kind of find like a new meaning kind of thing. Um, I kind of have like a similar situation where like I have a parent who has like a condition, and I feel like growing up, it's always been in the back of our minds, like with me and like my other siblings and my mom, especially. And I feel like in my adult life, it has affected me where I feel like you're kind of like in a strange like headspace of like, how do I move forward? How do I do things for myself? And you know, even being first generation, it's like, how do I do the things that I want to do, but then also how do I help my family? You know, and I feel like in a way you kind of like learn how to be more resilient and find the power within you, like whether you kind of like it or not. But I feel like in a way it's for the better, because I feel like you learn more about yourself and like the capacity like you can have like as like a body of just like emotions and like you know, I always tell my friends like being Hispanic, being Latinx, I feel like we have two emotions, like rage or like complete sublime. There's really no like in between sometimes. And I wonder if it's like generational trauma or something of just seeing things for how it is, and you know, being really realistic with like not just art but like in any situation. It's like you kind of have to have like see life without the rose colored glasses, you know, like always. um but it's just something that struck me a lot with like your case, especially Daniela, like, and I applaud you a lot because I feel like being an artist and being a person, and like first and foremost I feel like you learn how to like survive. And I feel like COVID has kind of taught people like how to survive, but I feel like folks like us kind of already know how to like intuitively. And I don't know, I just really commend you with that. So
Oh, you're so
el
sweet.
poder. Yeah,
Gracias.
de nada. Um,
Yeah, definitely. When I look at your work, or this piece specifically, and I saw it upside down, it literally made my stomach turn. And then I read the title, Blues, and yeah, it gives you that like melancholious type of feeling to it. And it's unsettling, but it's also kind of welcoming. Like I want to keep, I want to be there.
Gracias, Evelyn. Um, yes, it's interesting because I it does feel like a moment in time because you know celebrations and family, my siblings, you know, those are the times that we get together and not able to hug them. You know, I'm a hugger. You know, No, así somos nos. You know, hey, como nos abrazamos and we love each other and it's hard not to do that, you know, and not able to get together, you know, because we don't often get together, but when we do, it's wonderful, you know. So it's thank you.
We, Daniela and Evelyn, we talked a little bit about not only like the melancholy or nostalgia, but also this gasp, this like hold my breath with your photographs of this moment in time. And in its photography, so it lends itself to that. But there's a certain kind of suspension in both of yours. Daniela, yours is upside down, which is very poetic. When I was a kid, I used to lie down my bed so that I would look at everything upside down and pretend that I was walking on ceilings. And so it brought me back to that. And then Evelyn with the screen, it took me a while to figure out what it was. Like at first it was just a light, and then I realized, no, it's the TV screen. And then it's like that energy and that you have to sit there in order for that to happen. And it only happens in photography, right? Like if you sit there, I mean, I guess your eyes will probably go a little gooey if you just stare at the screen that long. But there's this suspension. I don't know if either one of you want to talk to that.
Well, part of that suspension was why I actually chose to do it through or take it as a long exposure. Um, I don't know, it can be interpreted in different ways, either just talking about time in general, the span of time, or just actually sitting and resting and enjoying yourself, and how much time you actually want to dedicate, or just your outlook on self-care and just like mellowing down, you know, having your space, having your somewhere where you can feel cozy.
Thanks, Evelyn. Another thing that we talked about, I guess you guys have sort of touched on the patriarchy, but I'm in the timelines. But I'm curious about this idea of portal as well. Oscar, you talked about it in the very beginning, but I think for me, all three of them definitely have this portal sense in with this kind of weird dystopia of either, you know, explicitly with your piece, Oscar, or with these weird suspensions of time in the other pieces.
Mhm. Um, I just feel like, sorry, like with my work, the self sculpture, if you look at it, there's like a tiny little piece of mylar at the bottom, and it's like reflective, and it kind of I guess ties in with like Daniela's work about when you brought up the whole like Alice in Wonderland motif. Like for me, I think about like reflection and just the notion of like just how a mirror in itself can be like a portal, and I think the reason why I cling to this notion of like just healing and portals is I think like a not to sound like very misanthropic or like really like pessimistic, but I feel like in a way like you're kind of seeking like a way out kind of thing, and I feel like my work is now about that. Like I guess it's like a really Virgo thing to say, like, you know, being very empathetic and caring about others and kind of like thinking about the gallery and like the art experience is like more of like a transformative type of thing where people just go to like, you know, just release or decompress. And I think about people who like are not thinking about art always. I feel like they kind of go to these spaces to just decompress or kind of just find themselves or find some notion of like humanity or like connection with other people. And I feel like to kind of shift the conversation away from COVID, I feel like we're still in like a, you know, really interesting time with like identity politics in terms of like Black Lives Matter and again like white supremacy and like the patriarchy. I feel like we're in this other bubble of like different generations who have lived through the past generation, so like the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. And I feel like we're all kind of like in a strange timeline of like, you know, how do we fix this? How do we like, you know, how are we more present now and like help to like deconstruct all these like violent forces, these violent agents that are like really like deteriorating like a lot of people and like just I don't know, like misleading them, I guess you could say. But in terms of portals, I feel like that's one of the reasons why I'm creating work about that, because I feel like we're in this age where I feel like artists are now like they're not really thinking so much about the material, they're just thinking about like what they have. And I think it's a very resourceful, like utilitarian approach to art making that I feel like you kind of see it in like in the 80s with like or even the 70s like feminist craft making. And I feel like we're in this new age renaissance of like immaterial mindedness with like when it comes to art. Um using like everyday materials, like, you know, like I said, like I use like a polo shirt and like underwear and socks to like make like chain links or something. And I think there's something really valuable in that, and I feel like there's something really magical about like I talk about like the transfer of energy, and I feel like there's something really like interesting about the labor of love and just really sitting there and like making something or sewing something versus like photographers just kind of like take pictures and that's it. But I feel like, I mean, that has its own process too, but I feel like in art making, like making sculptures, like it's really interesting just sitting there and like, you know, just like sitting with the work and just really like kind of like casting a spell on it, or like, you know, whispering little somethings, little charms or something. I guess that's how I view like art making. Just I think more about the process and like what it really means to sit with it, and just, you know, it's a form of escape. It's a form of like healing because you're really sitting there and like thinking about it. Sometimes I feel like you got to do something to kind of like get your thoughts together in a strange way. I don't know if that makes sense. If anyone else wants to chime in, you know, process of art or
I think it's kind of like busy hands to distract yourself almost, you know. And when I look at your work, it is beautiful, like how you're describing it. That's exactly what I get from it. Like it's charming and it's soft, and, and there's something that you can tell that when that has the love there's love that went into that, definitely. And when I see, I did notice the mylar. I didn't realize that's what it was, but I did notice that it was reflective, and it's very poetic to me how the chain comes down, but it doesn't necessarily touch anything. Yet the reflection of it kind of gives it that continuous line, and it's kind of like how you were speaking now, like in this time we are reflecting a lot more, and we are maybe humanizing a little bit better, depending where we live. And we live in LA, so everyone over here is pretty similar in comparison to the whole US. But yeah, when I see that the reflection and the continuity of time, and just spending your time dedicating love to your piece.
But then I think about Daniela's work also, and just like the mere fact that you'd like kind of just change the orientation of like the image, I feel like adds so much like more it's not just like a photo of like your front door, but it's like, you know, when I first saw it, I thought they were like pillows like sitting like on the floor, but then I realized, oh wait, they're like these metallic balloons like just resting, kind of looking like coral or something, like at the bottom of the ocean, like next to like some like ship or something. But definitely I feel like it's just interesting how like something so simple as like changing the orientation of an image like really like changes, like, you know, you kind of, like you said, like you kind of get lost and you get like this escapist feeling, and it does bring you back to that like notion of like being young and like making or like finding little joys in like normal everyday things versus like having a nice Xbox or something. You kind of find like the joy in something so simple, which I think is really interesting, and I took away from that a lot with your piece, Daniela. So thank you.
Thank you, Oscar. Yeah, the door. It's like you want to open that door, right? So that's why through the editing piece, it's like, oh, it's like I kept looking at the door, and it takes you like, so it's, I guess it's part of I guess the processing, right? That gets to you where you actually get the door, and then you do something with it, and like you said, trying to escape to another world or dimension.
I definitely feel that through your image, there's a lot of curiosity. And typically when you think curiosity, you think of a child. You would think of a child. You would expect a child to be curious. And I know that you used your childhood memories to inspire the way that you went about your work or your piece. And I don't know, it draws me in. Like it is a little hypnotizing.
Yeah, Evelyn. It does. Childhood memories are the best, right?
I'm gonna give you guys, you know, we're nearing 9 o'clock, so I don't know if there's anything that we haven't touched on that you want to talk about, either in your piece and somebody else's piece, or about life right now. It's fine too. And I also want to give anybody on Facebook, if they have any questions. Again, there's lots of validation. Jose Lopez was responding to Oscar as you were talking about making work. Jose says it's like meditation. And so I feel like that was really what you were talking about. Last thoughts? No. Okay, well, I want to thank you, each of you, for being here. Oh, let me put this in the chat. Evelyn had talked about John Kilborn, Killing Me Softly, so I've added that to the chat in Facebook. Thanks, Evelyn. I want to thank you guys for coming out tonight, for being open and vulnerable to talk about yourself and your work and what your experiences during the quarantine and being in your home and how that's affected you, both physically and mentally, and for everything that goes into it. There's a couple things I want to do before we close out. I want to let everybody know that the next conversation is going to be on Tuesday the 15th, and it'll start at 6:30 Pacific time. And it'll be with artists from that have work in the connections section. So Kenneth Kinsley, Jessica Oler, Laura Paul, and Nina Wang. And then also we have 3 more ancillary events. One of them is by Jody Wood. It's www.soszip.com. It's a mutual aid. It's an ongoing event, an ongoing piece. On the 20th, it's Sunday at 1 p.m. Andrea Nush is doing a participatory performance. It's called, let me make sure I get the name right. I don't wanna. It's called Calm and Chaos Coexist and Collide. And then you can join via Zoom. If you go to the website, you can sign up to be a part of the participation, or you can tune in here on Facebook Live. And then the last Sunday, September 27th, there'll be a live Stillick with Michael Rippins, as similar as a participatory performance. So you can sign up to be there on Zoom, or you can tune in on Facebook. And as I mentioned, the next takeovers that are coming up are Kayla Tang she'll start on the 13th, and we've got Ace Alamillo. Until then, so I want to thank everybody for being here on Facebook. Thank all the artists. And I want to remind everybody that's in the United States to vote. Everybody that can vote in the United States to vote. And if you cannot vote, urge the people that you know to vote. All right. Bye, everybody. Bye, Facebook.
So much.
Oh, wait. 1 second. How does everyone feel about the role of photography changed in the time of COVID before we end? This is from Christopher Anthony Velasco. Any takers?
I definitely feel that sometimes it's a lot more limiting. People want to take care of themselves. If you want to do portraits, they might not want to, just because, well, they're trying to stay healthy, or just being out. It's a little more difficult, a little more challenging for sure. But as far as the creative process goes, you just gotta be creative. You wait and feel inspired.
Yeah, I think definitely, like in my case, photography, before it was like, oh, I could go out and take photos any time of day or time. And now, because I feel like, oh, I have to take care of myself, I'm very careful. But like Evelyn said, you could find creativity, you could take a photo of your backyard, and like the whole process, it's still out there. It's just a little bit, for some of us, a little bit limited, I guess.
I think more than ever, it's important to like take more pictures now. I know, like, obviously there's like, the risk factor, you have to be safe and, practice different measures. But I think it's important, like, the typical like thing to say of like documenting the present nowness. Because, in 10 years, we'll be like, oh yeah, I remember in 2020 when we're going through an epidemic and also like intense, like systemic racial issues, like social issues, like in America. But I think more than ever now, like artists have to put on their creative hat and really think of ways to be more innovative. Like I know we are already, but I feel like now it's like, how do you step it up even more and like, take portraits of people, or take photos of like the forests that have been like burned down, or like the valleys. It's all these things that are happening that I feel like it's important to document them, but also like not trivialize it to a point where I feel like it kind of like devalues like what is really going on. But I think just doing it in a more like just bringing it to mind, I guess you could say, for the future, to show them that, you know, that it can happen anytime, I guess. But
Yeah. Thank you all. Thank you Christopher for asking that question. I think it's important to think about the role of photography as documentation, the role of photography as a creative endeavor, and the role that photography has as imagery here in 2020. All right, so I'm going to post this to our YouTube channel, so it'll live in perpetuity. If you have any other questions for the artists, they also all have Instagram handles that you can reach them at, and I'll put those in the chat. All right. Officially, goodbye. Bye, Facebook.